right. How's everybody today? Excellent. So, I want to start today with a quick question. How many people in this room track some aspect of their health care? Steps, food, diet, exercise, weight, things like that? Keep your hands up. I'm exactly right. So the 60% number actually comes from a Pew study, which I find fascinating. 60% of all Americans say they track some aspect of their weight, diet, or exercise routine. Now, this is not necessarily tracking in the way that we might do it with devices. A lot of people say they track it in their heads, but I still think that that's a good metric to keep in mind. Now, Leonard Kish said recently that an engaged patient is the blockbuster drug of this century. He actually has some data to back that up. Lipitor is a drug that is commonly given to people to reduce cholesterol. It's the most commonly prescribed drug for cholesterol reduction in this country. It costs $4 a pill. And studies have shown that literally 1 out of 100 people are actually helped by this drug. At the same time, 88% of people that are enrolled in coordinated care programs have a reduced risk of dying from a cardiac-related cause. And a coordinated care program is just a program basically where lots of different doctors and nurses and caregivers get together to help people do the right things. Exercise well, eat better, take their meds, things like that. Another data point, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, did a study on coordinated care for chronic disease management. They found that people who enrolled in those programs had a 20% reduction in hospital admissions, an 86% increase in patient satisfaction. That's huge. And maybe even most importantly, especially these days as we see the system completely running out of money, a $1,600 average cost per patient per year compared to $13,000 or $77,000, depending on the setting of care. So it's pretty clear that this idea of patient engagement equals better outcomes and lower costs. And this is what we're trying to do in the healthcare system today. A lot of people think the Affordable Care Act is basically about building a health insurance marketplace. There are many, many, many other parts of that act which are all focused on trying to figure out how we get the government to pay, instead of paying for services, to actually pay for value, to pay to keep people healthy, as opposed to treating them when they're sick. So, last question, or 2 more questions. First of all, who here knows within a few $100s what the balance of your checking account is? Most of you. Okay. Who knows your cholesterol? Right, just a few. Here's the crazy thing, right? Cardiac disease is the #1 killer of all Americans. And cholesterol is the #1 indicator of cardiac disease, or cardiac disease that's about to happen out there. And by the way, those of you who did raise your hand who knew what your cholesterol was, my guess is that you're getting that cholesterol measured once a year, right? Sort of a meaningless number because cholesterol actually fluctuates on a daily basis, and what's more important is the trend, not the static number at any given point in time. So my point is that if patient engagement is the blockbuster drug of this century, we are not engaged patients, and by the way, we're probably the ones who are going to be most engaged. So the question is, why is that? And what can we do about this stuff? Now, there are all kinds of different things that we could start thinking about, but I want to talk today about something that I'm a personal big geek about, which is this quantified self-tracking movement, and ways that I think that we can take the program from where it exists today and see what happens if we kind of explore some of the possibilities for tomorrow. So where are we today with this stuff? Let's talk about me for a second. This is a graph of my weight over the last 3 years or so. I have one of these scales. All right. I didn't expect, that was not intentional. I'm making a point. So, but thank you, I appreciate that. So what's interesting to me about this is that I started off, weight is a chaotic system as well. Don't look at the individual data points, look at the sort of rough trends over time. And if you look at that first segment, up to that first red circle, you'll see that there's sort of a plateau there, right? And then a precipitous drop. When I looked at that and looked at the data, it turned out that that precipitous drop was when I first got my Fitbit and started tracking steps. Right? Point being, hey, tracking this stuff, just watching the data actually helped me make a difference in my lifestyle and in the things that I was trying to achieve. Then that second plateau is sort of my new norm after the Fitbit, and then you see it started to go up again right around 2012. I thought about it again. It turns out that that's when I started lifting weights for the first time. So I started replacing or building muscle mass as opposed to whatever other kind of mass I was putting in. No idea what it was. And then there was another plateau. So I hit my sort of next step. And then you see this weird sort of squiggly decline. And the only thing I can think of for this is that it's when I started this job at Health and Human Services and stopped being able to like exercise or eat lunch or do anything that I did before. So that's my weight. This is a graph of, so a little bit of a story. So I lived in London for a few years, and we had a kid under the NHS, and this is a picture of the fetal heart rate monitor during her birth. Now, my dad is an OBGYN, and he was in the US, and I was in London. And so during the course of this lengthy labor, I kept taking pictures of this fetal heart rate and emailing it to him to get his opinion on what was actually going on. Because actually you see some decels here, which are when the heart rate slows down. And so it's not like it wasn't a terrible thing, but it wasn't a great thing. And we didn't feel like we were getting the right information. This really pissed off the doctors in the room, by the way, just FYI. Not necessarily the best thing to do. But my larger point here is that in both of these circumstances, we require an expert or somebody who cares about this stuff, somebody who knows about this stuff, to interpret the data to help us make decisions, right? In many ways, we are information rich and analysis poor. And that's what happens today. So this is all changing, okay? And I'll use tomorrow in quotes because some of this stuff is here right now, but it's just sort of getting started. Many of you know this device, the Basis Watch that's out there. It's the first device that's really starting to not just measure more physiological things, so it measures blood oxygenation and pulse and things like that, but most importantly, they don't necessarily give you the raw data. They start to give you analysis. So if weight loss is a goal, one of the things that science has discovered is that if you go to sleep and wake up at a regular time every day, you'll be more apt, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. You'll be more apt to lose weight. So what they'll do is they'll notice when you're doing something wrong and tell you proactively, do something different. Same thing with this device. This is a device called Kinsa. It's actually on Indiegogo right now. I think they have a few $1,000s left to go to fund it. But it's a smart thermometer, okay? Pretty simple. You put it in your mouth and it takes your temperature, but it connects to your smartphone and starts to do some really interesting analysis. Like, for example, it can tell you when you're about to get sick, right? And maybe you can actually then make some changes before you actually do get sick. So again, starting to see some of this proactivity. In the clinical setting, this is a device, well actually this is a device made by Apple, but the software on the device is made by a company called Gauss Surgical. A couple of doctors who, turns out one of the biggest problems in surgery is measuring blood loss, okay? And it makes sense, you know, you cut somebody open and blood starts coming out and you use gauze pads to kind of soak up the blood. And the problem is that you never really know how much to transfuse back in because you don't know how much you've lost. In med school, I guess what they do is they teach doctors to weigh gauze pads on scales to figure out, you know, they know how much blood weighs, so you can figure out, and how much a gauze pad weighs, so you can figure out how much you lost. But it turns out that in operating rooms, that just doesn't happen, right? Like, you don't have time to be sitting there weighing gauze pads. So these guys came up with this idea to take an iPad, mount it on a surgical pole, take gauze pads and pass them in front of the camera, have a picture taken, send it up to the cloud, processed by an algorithm, which then determines exactly how much blood and other things is in that gauze pad, and tells the doctors that are doing the surgery exactly how much blood to transfuse back into that patient. I think that's really cool, okay? And again, more proactivity. And then finally, you guys have probably all heard of the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize, right? If not, this is it's a $10 million prize that the X Prize Foundation and Qualcomm got together to do. You guys remember Star Trek, I'm sure. The tricorder is the thing you pass over your body to figure out what's wrong. What they want to do is build something that measures, non-invasively measures 15 disease conditions. And actually, based on, it turns out the FDA is also involved in this because as a device, it has to be approved and regulated by the FDA. So they actually have a team of people that are working on this challenge with the X Prize Foundation, which, by the way, I think is super cool that the FDA is doing this. But according to the people that I talked to there, they're actually seeing some really interesting developments which are getting to the point where this thing is going to be a reality literally within the next year or two. Okay, so this is pretty awesome. So we're moving from this sort of analysis poor state to a more analysis rich state, but we've got a long way to go. And in fact, those two devices, the consumer devices, the Basis watch and the Kinsa thermometer, are literally the only two that we could find that fit into this category in the consumer side. And we look, we scan the market for this stuff quite frequently. So what I thought I'd do is then now give sort of we'll use a little thought experiment here and go into the short-term future. What could this be? What could this look like not too long from now? And so like any good scientist, I figured I would use myself as the subject of this thought experiment. That's really big. My wife told me not to do this, but I'm going to do this anyway. So here's the setup. I was out last night, got home at about 1 in the morning, had a few drinks with some friends, went to bed, woke up at around 9, but I got 8 hours sleep, but I'm feeling kind of groggy, and I don't know why. Now, I live this is the sort of next-gen smart house, right, where my movements can be tracked. All of this stuff is sort of built into the sensors that exist in the house and on devices that I'm wearing. And so I step into the bathroom, I look into my smart mirror, and it tells me that I got 8 hours of sleep, but only 2 hours of REM sleep. Okay, so now I start to understand why maybe I don't feel so good, but that doesn't actually get into the why. The next thing that pops up, because I have a smart toilet, is the analysis of my gut microbiome, which then goes a little bit further and reminds me that I had above normal alcohol consumption last night, and I definitely should not have had that jumbo slice at the end of the night. And by the way, if you guys have ever seen a jumbo slice in DC, literally they're like the size of your face. It's crazy. I don't recommend it ever. So now I really understand why I feel pretty crappy this morning, but one of the other insights that we've learned from behavioral science is that if you take your goals and share your goals with loved ones, family members, your mother, you tend to be more accurate at hitting your goals. You tend to focus on them more. So I decided to share all my data with my mother, who woke up 2 hours earlier than me and made a little disapproving video. That's actually my mother. And that's not an unfamiliar look. She is a Jewish mother, after all. So, okay. Anyhow, she sends this video. I feel chastised. I know that I should not have done the things that I did the night before. And my refrigerator knows what it's got in it, so it basically takes the ingredients there, tells me I should have a dry English muffin, some egg whites, a banana, and then my recommended exercise is it's a beautiful day out, so I should actually get on my bike and bike to work. I feel okay. So I've got a plan. I've got everything set to go. I go downstairs. I make my breakfast. I eat my breakfast. I hop on my bike. I'm pedaling to work, riding down Connecticut Avenue. There's a lot of traffic. I decide I'm going to jump the curb and ride down the sidewalk to get around some of it, and I crash. And I break my fall with my wrist in my hand, and now it really hurts, and it's a little swollen. But luckily, I have the next-gen tricorder on my phone, pass it over my wrist. Turns out that I have a slight fracture of my radius, which my phone then tells me, hey, no problem, there's a Minute Clinic a couple of blocks away. It takes that scan, it sends it to the Minute Clinic. I walk over there, and as I arrive, I have a 3D printed cast customized to my physiology and a set of pills, prescription painkillers that I can take to reduce the swelling and get rid of the pain. This is not that far off, folks. I mean, everything I just described is actually almost there. But what I think is really interesting is that not once in this scenario did I actually interact with a doctor, right? And if you think about it, many of those things that were part of this scenario are actually things that we would do today where we would interact with doctors. That's actually my dad. I managed to work both of them into this presentation. I think, actually I said he's an OBGYN, so he'll probably be okay because algorithms don't catch babies, and we'll always need one of those. But I think one of the big questions is what happens with the primary care doctor in the future? And this is actually really important because right now we have a shortage of primary care doctors in this country. Once the Affordable Care Act goes into effect and a lot more people actually have affordable insurance coverage and can have access to affordable care, we're going to have an even bigger problem. The recent estimate that I saw is that we're going to be about 52,000 primary care doctors short in the next couple of years. And so this is something that we have to figure out. And frankly, I don't know what the answer to that question is. We don't have real good solutions. We have organizations within HHS that are working to train more people and send more people to different places. But this is something that I think we have to figure out. This is something that I think the technology, as I just described, can help with. But at the end of the day, the thing that really matters is this patient engagement. And one thing I can tell you for sure is that if we don't figure out patient engagement, we will never, ever, ever hit our goals of better outcomes and lowering costs. Thank you guys very much.